I retired in 2004, and I moved to Post Falls, Idaho, to be with my wife. My wife's family is from the Spokane area, and that's only 22 miles away. So it was a perfect place to go. We retired on a golf course, and I, love to play golf. I'm not very good at it, but I do love doing it. I wasn't ready to quit working, so I did some volunteer work. One of them was with the local college. They were starting a program to help new businesses that are having problems, or businesses that do not understand business sheets, do not understand profit loss, how to get to profit loss, how to advertise, how to buy properly. And it was a lot of fun. I worked with some nice young people and a couple of older people. I had one company that was doing $50 million in business. And I said, well, how much profit did you make last year? And he said, I don't know. And he didn't know. He had no idea if he made profit or not. He had great cash flow. So we showed him how to go about setting up his books and doing different things. And to me, it was a lot of fun. I got in with different people. Helping people is something that I enjoy doing. They were very respectful and very pleased when you helped. It was a non-paying position. It didn't matter. I had enough money. So that was my first thing I volunteered at. The next one was CASA. For you who don't know what CASA is, it's Court-Appointed Children's Advocate. You are an advocate for a child. Let's say that their mother is on drugs, the father's in prison. The mother can't take care of the child, so they're in foster care. So you get to visit the child in foster care and make sure they're being taken care of. If they have to go to court for any reason, you go to court with them. If they're being misused in any way, you report to the judge. One of my first cases was the judge assigned me was a 15-year-old girl. Her mother had driven her over to Spokane, which is 22 miles away, dropped her off at a homeless shelter and said, don't come back. The child had done nothing wrong. The mother was on drugs. The father was long gone somewhere. I don't know where he was, but he was completely out of the picture. And my job was to help this girl navigate the foster care system, make sure she was taken care of properly, write a report for the judge and what I think should happen, if the mother should get the child back or the grandmother should get her. The grandmother was a piece of work also. The child did something wrong, so the grandmother kept her out of school for 6 months as punishment, wouldn't let her out of the house. She couldn't leave the house for 6 months. And I wrote up my report, and it was not a good report. It showed that the child should go into foster care and away from the parents and the grandmother. When we went to court, the grandmother and daughter had a lawyer, and the lawyer at the end of the session stood up and said, we will go along with everything that the court has said, of course, but we would like this CASA thrown off the case. And it was interesting. The judge looked at her and said, you know, lady, you make me sick. I could puke. That man has done more for your daughter in 3 months than you've done for her first 15 years. He will stay in the case, and that's it. So that's how the judges treated us. There were many cases, beautiful cases. Some of them I got to give the children back to the families. I remember a 6-year-old boy that my recommendation was that he goes back with the mother. I went and visited the mother just before the final hearing, and the poor lady was in tears, and I said, why are you crying? She said, because you're going to take my child away. I said, ma'am, when I see here, nobody's going to take your child away. You're a great mother. Yes, you had some problems. Your husband's a druggie. You were selling drugs. I know that you were at the low end, but what I see here in your home is nothing but love. And that little boy is getting love, and that's what he needs, and you're taking care of him. So when we went to court that day, it was kind of cute. The little boy and I became kind of close, and when he saw me in the courtroom, he ran over and sat by me. And I saw the judge look over and start smiling, because I guess that doesn't usually happen. So the judge asked him to come up, and the little boy went up and sat in the judge's lap. And he said, tell me about your home life. And the boy told him very honestly about his home life. And I had already written my letter to the judge that I thought the boy should return to the mother. So I knew he was going to get back to the mother. And finally, it's pretty interesting. These judges, I don't know what they seem cut out to be. This man looked at the little boy and said, you know, you're a lucky little boy. You have a great mother. You can go home. And he cried. The judge cried. So our system isn't always what it seems to be. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So I did that about 5 years. I had quite a few interesting cases. I had one man just out of jail when I went to his house at 7 o'clock at night to see his daughter and 2 other children. He said I couldn't come in. I said, well, I'm coming in. I've got court orders that says I can come in this residence at any time of day or night, and I'm going to do it. And as you know, I just got out of prison, and I could kill you right here. And I said, yep, and you go right back to prison. And he let me in. And as I walked through the house looking at different things, I could check under beds, I could check in refrigerators, make sure the right food was there. But I went by a bathroom, and I looked in, and there's all kind of drug paraphernalia and they're laying around in the bathroom. So I knew that the convict was back on drugs because he wasn't married. He was a single man taking care of 3 kids. And so I said, I'm going to talk to the boys individually. Where's your daughter? She said, my daughter's already in bed. I said, 7 o'clock, a 13-year-old girl's already in bed? I said, that doesn't make sense to me. So I went to the door and I knocked on the door, and there was a sound, but it wasn't the 13-year-old girl. It was a female, an older female. So I said, who's in there? And says, whose business is it? I said, it's my business. I'm coming in. She said, you can't come in. I went in. Here's an older lady, probably in her 20s. Not I say older, but 20s. But this girl's only 13. They're in bed together. And I can tell that underneath the covers they're not dressed. And I know what's going on. I couldn't believe it. So I walked out and I called the police. I said, please come and pick up 3 children here and take them to foster care for the rest of the night. And I'm going to go in and see the judge in the morning. So I went in and seen the judge in the morning. And I said, Judge, here's what I found last night. How can we get this girl out of there, and can we prosecute this older lady that was in bed with her? And he says, Jerry, I'm sad to tell you that we cannot prosecute the lady. In the state of Idaho, there is no laws on a female child sleeping with a older female lady. It's not in the books. We can't do a thing about it. Now, if it was a man in bed with her, we could put him in prison for the rest of his life. I'm hoping that someday these laws will change. It's wrong. It just shouldn't be that way. Then when I was talking to the boys later on, after they were in the foster care, when I went to visit them a couple of times, I asked them what they liked to play, what type of games. They said, oh, well, when Dad was home and Marilyn was home and we were home, we'd play Titty Twister. I said, what are you talking about? He said, oh, we twist each other's tits. I said, how about your sister? Oh, yeah, she had the bigger ones. So you can see what kind of life these kids have sometimes, especially these young girls. It's just unbelievable how they are treated. Because of my work in CASA and some of my preaching, I also did some preaching in some of the local churches. And one lady that happened to be in government saw me, and each year in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, they have the governor's breakfast. And she called and asked if I would be one of the speakers at the governor's breakfast, which, wow, to me, what an honor. Again, this is that young kid from a little town in Michigan. He's going to get to talk at the governor's breakfast. The governor's going to be there, the lieutenant governor, a lot of people, all of them wealthy and well thought of people. I started my speech out with John Kennedy's, do not ask what you can do for your country. Do not ask what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. But I phrased it different. I said, do not ask your God what he can do for you, but ask your God what you can do for him. In an ending, I kind of used Martin Luther King's saying, that I've seen it. I can see the things coming, what's coming, and it's going to be good, and we need peace. And I was hoping that someday that the girls in Idaho could walk down the street and feel safe, not be approached by men with drugs or men that wanted to get them into prostitution or whatever it is that we could get things right. So that was one of the highlights of probably being retired, was speaking at that governor's breakfast. I got some beautiful letters, one from the governor, from many of the different political figures that were there. So it made me feel really good. But the thing that most I like to do in retirement is I become a coach, basketball coach. As soon as I got here, I contacted 3 different schools, 4 schools really, and I went to the first tryout, and the guy said, if you had been here last week, I would have given you the job. And the next one I went to, they had me fill out a form, and they kind of asked how much money I made the year before and some other questions. I probably didn't have to answer them, but if I wanted a job, I was going to have to. But one of them on there was, how much money did you make the year before? Well, I had a pretty good year that year. I made a little over $520,000. So when I put that down for a $5,000 coaching job, there were some eyebrows. In fact, one of the people said, if you made this much money, why don't you just retire? And I said, why would I retire when I have all this energy and all this to give? I said, people give to me all their life. It's my time to give back. And they called me 2 days later and said, you would have had the job, but the man that we had here was an assistant for 10 years, and we feel we have to give him. But if anything goes wrong, we'll call you the next day. We'd love to have you be our coach. So 2 of them got turned down. The third one was Coeur d'Alene High School, which is one of the larger schools in the state. And I got to interview with the athletic director. They had just hired somebody the day before, and the man they hired was from Washington. He had won 4 state championships in the last 6 years. He had an impeccable record. He was a teacher. And I said, hey, I can't compete with that. He says, no, you can't compete with that, not with what you got. He said, but if he wasn't around, we'd be interested. So I felt pretty good about that. There were 2 other schools that I was going to visit. One was a charter school, and the other was a Christian school called North Idaho Christian. Well, I went to charter school, and I walked in the door, and this charter school is ranked number 5 in the nation of all high schools. It is a tremendous educational school. And the man I was meeting with was the man that had founded the school. And as I walked in, 2 students stopped me and said, sir, can we help you? And I told them who I was looking for. Oh, sure, come with us and I'll take you right to him and show you where Dr. Smith's office is. So they took me right to him, and I sat down, and he gave me the job on the spot. Problem was, even though he was the founder of the school, he was only a teacher there. He wasn't the principal. And the principal had hired somebody else the same day. So they ended up having to take the job back away from me, which was okay. I went to North Idaho Christian. I walked in the door and stood there, looked around, walked and looked around. Kids were walking by me. One bumped into me. Were not friendly. I said, oh boy, I don't want to come here. But finally I stopped and said, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so. I can't think of his name right now. And that's bad because he's one of my best friends, but I'm getting old. Brad Alden. I said, looking for Mr. Alden. He said, oh yeah, he's in the basement. I said, where's the basement? He said, you go that way and down. I'm like, okay. Now think about the charter school where the student took me by the hand almost and took me to the man, but this guy went down there. So I went down and finally found Brad, and we sat down and talked, and he liked my background, and he says, let me make some calls, and we'll see what we think of you. So he made some calls while I waited out in the lounge, and he came and says, you got the job. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, I called 2 of your schools, and both of them said we'd be lucky to get you. So I stayed there 20 years. When I first got there, we played only Christian League teams. And about the third, we'd won all our games the first 2 years. And then the third year, I said, I'd like to play public schools, Brad. And he said, no, Jerry, there's no way you can play public schools. They'll just beat you too bad. I said, well, I'd like to at least try. He said, no way. So about the 4th year, he decided that we could play not as a member of the state, but kind of as a associate member. So we could play the schools, but I couldn't go to the state tournament. Well, we ended up beating most of the public schools we played. One of the largest schools is Lake City Public School. They actually called us, I think it was in about 2020, 2021. They called us and said, is there any way we can play a game with you? We want good people to play against in non-conference. What an honor to have a 6A school that has probably 3,000 students, or maybe 2,000, call us a school that has 74 students and want to play. But I said, I think you're just a little too big for us, and turned them down. So he said, we would play our JV, and I said, fine. So we played their JV, and the JV beat us pretty good. But when I looked in the paper next day and read some of the names, and then at the next game read some of the names, I found out they had 4 of their varsity starters playing against us. But again, it was an honor. They asked us to play. Timberlake High School is a tremendous program. They won 6 state titles. They called us and said, hey, we'd be interested in playing you guys. We need good competition. Would you play us? Now, they're only a 3A, so I said, yeah, we'd be glad to play you, and it'd be an honor, and it was an honor. We played them for 2-3 years. They're now 4A, much bigger, 4-5 times us. And they beat us, but that was okay. They didn't beat us bad. We played Bonners Ferry, which is another 4A school, twice. Once we almost beat them. We had them right with 3 minutes to go, and they beat us, so we did okay. The smaller schools, we had played them and beaten them for years. The last 5 or 6 years we beat them, so they wouldn't play us anymore. We were too big a school, 74 kids, I guess, too big. We got to play a Priest River tournament, a Christmas tournament with all public schools and just us, and we won that 3 years in a row. I won, in my 20 years here, I've won 400 games. That's 20 games a year. As I'm saying this, I'm 83 years old and probably the oldest coach in the league. This will be in the state. This will be my last year. It was a big deal when I won my 400th because all my games were won after I was 63 years old. And that's unheard of in the sports world. So when you look back at everything I've been accomplished, everything I've had fun with, all the good times, all the bad times, I'd say I've had a wonderful life. The travel that I got to do, the countries, I've been all over Europe, I've been in the Middle East, I've been to Taiwan. My wife and I have traveled first class wherever we've went. We've just had a fantastic life. So I guess if you read this, the American dream is still possible. A poor boy, C student, 5'7", Vietnam War going on, probably where I should have went, can rise to where I did, to the second biggest company in Alaska government, asked to run for governor of the state, take a company on the stock exchange, the New York Stock Exchange. I was an honored guest on the New York Stock Exchange. I've met 3 presidents, talked to 3 presidents, movie stars, athletic stars, NBA owners, kings, prince, dictators. This is an interesting life to read about, but it's all because of God. Amen.